Michael Parkin. 50 years ago, the Department of Economics was formally established at the University of Western Ontario. Prior to 1966, economics was partnered with other disciplines, including political science and sociology. This weekend, Western economics is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Your convocation is a special part of our celebration as we honor two of Western economics' most illustrious faculty members. I am pleased to introduce to you our first honoree, Dr. Michael Parkin, Professor Emeritus. Dr. Parkin began his working career as a cost accountant in the steel industry in the UK. It wasn't long, however, before he decided to return to school. He earned his bachelor's in economics from the University of Leicester, his master's of economics from the University of Manchester. In 2010, he returned to the University of Leicester to accept an honorary degree of letters. Dr. Parkin began his academic career at the University of Sheffield and held appointments at the University of Leicester and the University of Essex before becoming a professor at the University of Manchester in 1970. While he was at Manchester, he met Dr. Grant Royber. Any of you take a class in Royber Hall? 2050, social science. Who was the dean of the Faculty of Social Science and always looking for talented researchers to hire. In 1975, the Department of Economics recruited Michael Parkin to Western, where he would remain for his career, publishing, teaching, and leading. Dr. Parkin retired from Western in 2004, but continues to maintain a strong connection with the Department of Economics. Dr. Parkin has published extensively, close to 150 articles in the area of monetary policy, exchange rate policy, and rational expectations. Early in his career, he was a vigorous proponent of the monetary school of thought and rose to be one of the global leaders of this movement. In Canada, he was a leading contributor to public debate concerning monetary policy. Dr. Parkin was president of the Canadian Economic Association in 1977 to 1998 and was named a fellow of the Canadian Economics Association in 2012. His greatest impact, however, has been on students. Dr. Parkin supervised 14 PhD students while at Western. Many of those students have gone on to influential academic and government careers, among them Stephen Poloz, the current governor of the Bank of Canada. Equally impressive are the more than 80 editions of textbooks that Dr. Parkin has authored, many with his wife, Dr. Robin Bada. His Principles of Economics and Intermediate Macroeconomics textbooks have been produced for countries all across the world, including Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, Spain, Indonesia, and China. Millions of students, including many of you, received their introduction to economics from Parkin and Bada. In the late 1980s, Dr. Parkin was chair of the Department of Economics. His leadership continued to make Western economics the #1 economics department in Canada, recognized then as an institution known worldwide for its research in macroeconomics, monetary economics, and international economics. Dr. Parkin is a leading example of an economist who left his mark on students, researchers, policymakers, and on Western. On a more personal note, Dr. Parkin is the proud father of 3 children and a grandfather of 5. He and Robin Bada spend their time still working on textbooks in Australia, the UK, and Canada. As his colleague, I have benefited greatly from working with Michael, from his mentorship, and from his unwavering support over the years. I could not be more pleased today that he is receiving this honor. Mr. Chancellor, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and in the name of the Senate, I ask you to confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, upon Michael Parkin.
By virtue of the authority vested in me as Chancellor, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa. Congratulations, Dr. Parkin.
David Laidler. As I mentioned earlier, as part of Western Economics' 50th anniversary celebration, we are honoring two of Western Economics' most renowned faculty members. I now have the pleasure to introduce our second honoree, Dr. David Laidler, Professor Emeritus. Dr. Laidler received his Bachelor's of Science in Economics from the London School of Economics in 1959. After that, he moved to the US, where he earned his Master's in Economics from Syracuse University in 1960 and his doctorate from the University of Chicago in 1964. As a doctoral student, he worked as a research assistant for Milton Friedman and Ann J. Swartz on their seminal book, Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960, published in 1963. David Laidler began his career as an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley, before returning to England to take up appointments at the University of Essex and then at the University of Manchester. He also met Dean Royber while at Manchester and was recruited to Western in 1975. While Dr. Laidler stayed at Western until his retirement in 2004, supervising numerous students, serving as department chair in the early 1980s, and helping to make Western Economics the #1 economics department in Canada. He remains an active and prolific researcher, continuing to contribute to both the economics profession at large and Western economics. David Laidler has published extensively in the areas of monetary economics, monetary policy, and the history of thought of monetary economics. He is a foremost expert on monetary policy regimes in Canada and North America. He played a major role in the Bank of Canada's adoption of inflation rate targeting as a means of achieving stability and transparency in Canadian monetary policy and the Canadian economy, and was selected to serve as the Bank of Canada's first special advisor from 1998 to 1999. Dr. Laidler's influence was amplified in part through his textbooks, The Demand for Money, Theories and Evidence, and Introduction to Microeconomics, which were both published in several translations. He was named a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada in 1982 and served as President of the Canadian Economics Association in 1987 to 1988. A firm champion of the value of a historical perspective for macroeconomic theorists and policy analysts, Dr. Laidler was named a Distinguished Fellow of the History of Economic Society in 2009. In 2012, he was named a Fellow of the Canadian Economics Association. Dr. Laidler has been awarded a number of research prizes over the years. These include the first Doug Purvis Memorial Prize in 1993 for a work of excellence in Canadian economic policy, the Donner Prize in 2004 for Outstanding Book of the Year on Canadian Public Policy, Western's 1999 Helmuth Prize, and the 2015 Thomas Guggenheim Prize for the History of Economic Thought. Dr. Laidler remains one of the top economists in Canada, active on both the monetary policy scene and the history of economic thought research front. Throughout the years, Dr. Laidler has been supported by his wife, Ancha, and his daughter, Nicole. Between conferences and travels, he enjoys spending time with his grandson. I know I always look forward to his return and visits to the department. The ever-helpful statesman, David is someone I look to and depend on for support and advice, and I am delighted that he is receiving this honor today. Mr. Chancellor, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and in the name of the Senate, I ask you to confer the degree of Doctor of Law, honoris causa, upon David Laidler.
By virtue of the authority vested in me as Chancellor, I admit you to the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa. Congratulations, Dr. Laidler. On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite Dr. Michael Parkin to address Convocation.
Chancellor Cohen, President Chakma, deans, honored guests, graduates, and your friends and families. It is with great pleasure that I thank President Chakma and Weston for the honors that you are bestowing on David and me today, and for the opportunity to address and congratulate a new group of Western graduates. I'm not sure that I'm worthy of the honor that I'm receiving today, but I am sure that David does. David and I are economists, most of whose research and teaching has been in the subdiscipline called macroeconomics. That's the part of economics that studies the forces that determine the standard of living and all the things that influence it, like income growth, employment and unemployment, inflation and deflation, stock prices and interest rates, and the effects on these variables of the actions of governments and central banks. You could be forgiven for wondering what this university, a leading university, is doing, bestowing honorary degrees on the participants in a scientific enterprise that apparently has more problems than solutions, more failures than successes. You're graduating today at a time of economic hardship. You're entering a labor market that has got serious macroeconomic challenges. The challenges became visible almost a decade ago, in 2008, when a global financial crisis sent the Canadian and global economies into a deep recession known as the Great Recession, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. We didn't see this event coming. It took us by surprise. And the main reason it took us by surprise was that the macroeconomic models of the time didn't have financial crises in them. They had no mechanism for creating such an event. We would have told you it couldn't happen. David Laidler knew it could happen, though. He knew it could happen because, unlike most macroeconomists, he studied the history of the great booms and busts, inflations and deflations, and the work and thinking of the scholars who lived through those events and who explained to their best what caused them. Viewed through the longer perspective of the history that David has studied, the surprise in 2008 was not that we had a major economic downturn, but that we hadn't had such an event for 70 years since the Great Depression. In the further defense of macroeconomists, I don't want to make it seem as if we're all incapable of anything useful. We did make some progress over the years, and progress that helped to create what was called the Great Moderation, a period of economic prosperity, and also made some progress in devising policies that made the effects of the Great Recession less severe than they otherwise might have been. David and I first met on a sunny October morning, exactly 50 years ago. At that time, the sun was shining on the economy too. Real income per person was growing at a rate that doubled the level of income in a generation, in 25 years. In the last 25 years, real income has grown, but not even by as much as 50%, let alone doubling. And in the last 10 years, 2005 to 2015, the growth rate of incomes and living standards has been so slow that the next time it doubles on current growth rates is the year, wait for it, 2136, 120 years in the future before we double our living standard again, unless we can speed up growth. No one knows why economic growth has slowed. Some people say that it happened because we basically run out of wants. We've conquered the problem of scarcity, so growth will be in the doldrums forever. Another group of economists say, no, growth will come back, but only when governments borrow money and spend it big on infrastructure projects. There's a third view, and that view is that The economy will grow again because we're in a temporary period of slow growth that's going to be ended by a new wave of innovation and economic prosperity. That economic growth, it always comes in waves, and we've just been through a period of temporary slowness that's going to be reversed. I think the third view is the most likely, and for two reasons. First reason is that there are already a large number of new technologies in the wings that have not yet been fully exploited, that when they are exploited will create new businesses and new jobs. You can think of many of these for yourselves, but I'll just name three examples. Advances in battery technology that make batteries charge faster and last longer. Advances in metals technology that brought graphene, a material, an atom thick, that's stronger than steel. And the development of additive manufacturing, or 3D printing. These are examples of many other technologies which have the capacity not only to bring new jobs and new businesses and new growth, but to create a new industrial revolution. The second reason why I think growth is around the corner is you, today's new graduates. You are smart people, and you've received an education from a very fine university. Some of you have graduated in higher degrees, many of you, about 100 of you, in doctorates. Many of you have, excuse me, I picked up the wrong piece of paper. Many of you have graduated in subjects that provide you with a direct access to a job in teaching, in journalism, in law, and in the healthcare sector. Some of you have learned the more general lessons of the arts and sciences and the social sciences. But all of you, regardless of your level of your study or your field of study, have learned something very important. That is how to think, how to approach a problem, and how to tackle a problem. It's your thinking and problem-solving skills to which you will turn again and again in your careers and in your life that are the most important things that you take from Western and take into the world. You're graduating and entering the labor market at a time of great difficulty. But with what you've learnt at Western, and with the combination of the imagination and self-discipline that has brought you here today, I'm sure that you're up to the task. Thank you.
On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite Dr. David Laidler to address Convocation.
Chancellor Cowan, President Chakma, deans, graduates, honored guests, and your friends and families, I've always found Michael Parkin a really hard act to follow. And today's going to be no exception, but I'll try. Let me begin by expressing not only my personal gratitude to Western for today's award, but almost my enormous pleasure that it's Michael that I'm sharing it with. 50 years is a long time for two academic careers to be intertwined, and today is truly a landmark for us. Now, Michael's remarks have been outward-looking, about how our subject has helped us, sometimes more and sometimes less to be sure, to understand the world we live in. Let me then complement his remarks by looking inward to how our work has fitted in at Western. As Audra Bolus has said, this month marks another significant 50th anniversary, that of the founding of the economics department, which Michael and I have served for so long. Today's award, therefore, recognizes not just our own accomplishments, but those of our many colleagues and students as well. And in drawing attention to what has been taught and learned here about monetary economics over the years, it stands as a firm rebuke to those who argue that universities like Western care only about research. Mind you, Michael and I did carry out research here as well, and the promise of the intellectual space we needed for this was one of Weston's big attractions in 1975, and it's a promise that has always been kept as well. The fact is, if we hadn't done research, we would have run out of useful things to teach very quickly. Now, let me explain that. Academics like us always hope that our next paper or book will create a big splash among our colleagues far and wide. But, give or take an occasionally satisfying ripple, sometimes barely visible, we're mostly disappointed. Even so, we weren't wasting our time, even with those papers that immediately after launch quietly sank without any trace whatsoever. The reason for this is as follows. For an academic researcher to give their work the chance of being intelligible to their colleagues worthwhile worldwide, they have to make the effort to understand what it is those colleagues know, or there can be no communication between us. And it's what we learn from this endeavor that then mainly informs our teaching. So what Michael and I taught during our careers at Weston, they weren't our own ideas. They were what a living and evolving discipline called economics thought it knew or was in the process of discovering. For us to be able to do this, the activity of participating seriously in research was what mattered. Personal success, if any, was a bonus. The academic leaders, Grant Reiber and Clark Leith, who brought us to Weston, understood this, and every student and faculty member of the department they built, with its marvelous administrative and support staff, benefited from their wisdom just as much as Michael and I did. Now, universities sometimes bill themselves as creating and disseminating knowledge. But to stop here misses a fundamental point. Above all, universities are places where knowledge is conserved within academic disciplines. Now, no doubt the social usefulness of discipline-specific ideas is enhanced when it's put to work in combination with knowledge drawn from other disciplines. And interdisciplinary work is absolutely essential if universities are to earn their keep in today's world. But, and it's a big but, if a university does not nurture individual disciplines for their own sakes, the knowledge that should be conserved within them decays, and along with that, the foundations for interdisciplinary work as well. Now, Michael and I have been committed to discipline-centered teaching and research throughout our careers in what has always been a like-minded department. And in honoring us today, Weston is proclaiming that it is important and valued here as it ever was. And I am so overjoyed to hear this message.